Well, folks, I'll be honest with you. Last night was a rough night. Don't really know why. Went to bed at a normal time, and I woke up at 2 a.m. and I was bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and ready to go. And I said, well, that's a problem. And so I examined the ceiling for 3.5 hours. And my alarm went off at 6:30, and I said, oh, that's fun. So, if I seem like I'm in a bit of a brain fog today, I apologize in advance for that. Just to be honest with you, I feel a little under attack this morning, and so I know that means that somebody here needs to hear the message today, which means I got to persevere through it. If you would open with me actually to Psalm 22 to begin. We're going to start there, and then we're going to jump ahead into our study in Matthew. Psalm 22 is one of those pesky lamenting psalms we were talking about last week, where we talk about grieving and suffering and how to deal with grief and suffering. But this one in particular is special because it's seen as one of the most clearly messianic psalms that we have. In fact, Jesus himself is going to quote it quite a bit today, and most of what we see in Matthew's account is going to quote it as well. I want you to mark it, though, because as I'm going to read just a few lines from it and a couple of sections that I'm going to skip around in it, I want you to go back this week, and I want you to look at it as you meditate on the message and Matthew's account of the crucifixion and see just how many parallels there are to what Matthew describes in Matthew 27 and what we see here in Psalm 22. It begins in verse 1. That's all right. My God, why have you forsaken me? We talked about that distance before, didn't we? And we know that line's going to come up when? Jesus on the cross. In Matthew's account, this is the last words that Jesus actually utters. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me from the words of my groaning? Oh my God, I cry by day, but you do not answer, and by night, but I find no rest. Yet you are holy, enthroned on the praises of Israel. In you our fathers trusted. They trusted, and you delivered them. To you they cried and were rescued. In you they trusted and were not put to shame. We see that lamenting psalm template that we talked about last week, don't we? This idea of it's okay to groan, it's okay to cry out to God, but then turn. Remember who he is, remember what he has done. I'm going to point out two more sections today, and they come back to back. It's really 16 through 21 of this psalm. Here it says, for dogs encompass me, a company of evildoers encircles me. They have pierced my hands and my feet. I can count all of my bones. They stare and gloat over me, and they divide my garments among them. And for my clothing they cast lots. But you, O Lord, do not be far off. O you, my help, come quickly to my aid. Deliver my soul from the sword, my precious life from the power of the dog. Save me from the mouth of the lion. You have rescued me from the horns of the wild oxen. Again, we see that theme. Suffering, salvation. Groaning, redemption, right? Misery, suffering, but yet turning to God, trusting in God for what he is going to do. These are the words that Christ points us to while he is hanging on the cross. And you can see the crucifixion story. You can see the passion story in the psalm, can't you? We as Christians have heard it so many times. I'm sure you notice they're casting lots for my garment, right? They have pierced my hands and my feet. I am surrounded by dogs. That one might not make as much sense to you, but what we're going to see in Matthew's account today is that Jesus dies, Matthew shows us, essentially alone. He is surrounded by his enemies. We left him last week being mocked by the soldiers, right? He was surrounded by the Gentiles. They were openly mocking him, mocking his kinship. And then it says they had scourged him and they have sent him off now to be crucified. That's where we left him. He is surrounded by enemies. He has no friends. There is only one that he can turn to, and that is the Father. It is truly a despairing place to be, is it not? As we look at Matthew's account today, I'll remind you guys, some of you guys that are regulars, of something that I say every Easter, and that's, man, I really hate preaching the Easter message. I do. And not because I hate what the Easter message stands for. I love the resurrection account. I love talking about the crucifixion, all those things. It's just, as a pastor, there's so much pressure because you guys know the story. You know the narrative. And so there's always this pressure to do something that is, fresh and new and innovative with it. And that's just not who I am. I love to just sit in the scripture and just chew on it. And so today we're going to cover a good chunk. And I laugh because I told this to our group on Friday, and I said, we're gonna get through like 30 verses today. How do you think that went? Yeah, it didn't. No, we got through about 20. We have like 18 or 20, because I want us to get through this narrative, because you know this narrative. But I do have some thoughts as we go through, and really the big principle I want you to see is going to come right at the end. So I encourage you, hang in there with me. If you start to get bored and say, I know this story, Pastor. Yes, I know. Me too. Right? We still need to remember. We still need to see what God is doing and what God has done for us. So if you turn to Matthew 27, we're starting in verse 32 today. 27:32. As they went out, that is this procession, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. They compelled this man to carry his cross. And when they came to a place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull, they offered him wine to drink mixed with gall. But when he tasted it, he would not drink it. And when they had crucified him, they divided his garments among them by casting lots. Then they sat down and kept watch over him there. And over his head they put the charge against him, which read, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." Now, there's a lot packed into those few verses, isn't there? There's a lot that happens in a very short period of time. And that's something actually I want us to notice. Matthew, and really the other gospel writers themselves, don't dwell on the suffering of Christ. Did you catch that? Last week we talked about the scourging, right? And we talked about how brutal a scourging was. But we had to bring that out of the text, didn't we? We had to talk about that. We had to use extra biblical sources to talk about what a scourging was and what that torture was like. It wasn't something that was present in the text. In the text it simply says, they scourged him. And that was it. That was the end. And here, in the same way, how long do they spend talking about crucifixion? They crucified him. That's it. Why is that? Why is that? Well, for one, it's not really about the suffering. We bring that out, right? And I'm not saying that the suffering of Christ is not important. That's not what I'm suggesting today. So hold the stones for just a moment, okay? But we bring that out and we emphasize that because we know what it's all about. And we have to talk about it because we don't have firsthand experience of these tortures, do we? When's the last time you saw someone crucified for stealing a loaf of bread? I hope not. Right? Not something that happens very often. When's the last time you saw someone receive 39 lashes with a bone-embedded whip? No, it doesn't happen in our society, right? So we have to bring it out. We have to talk about those things. For them, they lived this horror. They didn't have to be told how horrific a scourging was. It simply says they scourged him, and everyone in that audience went, ugh, been there, not fun. Seen it, not fun. They have a visible memory of what that was like. Crucifixion, they didn't have to describe it. They'd seen it. These were punishments done in public as a deterrent. Because look, if you were going up, you see this man going up the hill who's already been scourged with this placard around his neck that says thief, or this man says he's king of the Jews, right? What does that deter you from doing? Whatever got them in that position, right? Don't sign me up for theft if I see that happening to a thief. Okay? And so here you have clearly this quick passing by because it's not what the focus is on. They don't need to dwell on it. They don't need to think about it too much. Now, there's a couple of cultural things happening here I do want to point out. And the first is this man, Simon from Cyrene. Now, we have talked before, but it's been quite a while, about the Roman act of compelling work, right? The Romans had a policy that any Roman soldier could compel any person within the Roman Empire to do work for them, right? You could carry their packs and such like that for a distance of miles, right? And Jesus actually uses this as a teaching on humility. He uses this as a teaching to say, if they ask you to go a mile, right, go 2. That's the idea behind it. Well, here you have Simon, who, what is his crime? Well, he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He just so happens to be walking by. Imagine that for a moment, that you were going about your business, running your errands, and all of a sudden the Roman soldier says, hey, you see the bloody guy with the crossbeam? You got to help him now. All of your plans have just been canceled for the rest of the day. You're now doing this. How would you like to have that for your government control? Not me, thank you very much. It's interesting, in Luke's account, we see Simon is actually mentioned, and then it tells us that he's the father of 2 believers. And what we think is the reason for this, and it's partially speculation, is that this is so effective. This affects Simon so deeply that he actually becomes a follower of Christ afterwards. As there's a familiarity with his children and the writers of the Gospels. It says when they came to the place called Golgotha, they offered him wine to drink mixed with gall, but when he tasted it, he would not drink it. Now, this is also a review for us. Last Christmas, we talked about this very passage. And if you remember it well, good for you. And I know some of you guys weren't here last Christmas, so that's fine too. But gall is myrrh. And we talked about it at Christmas because myrrh was one of the 3 gifts that was offered to Christ, wasn't it? You had gold, what? Gold and myrrh. Yeah, good. Okay, so we do remember these things. Now, I don't know about you. When you tell me wine mixed with gall is the refreshment that they offered to him, I'm thinking this is not a great refreshment, are you? It's not high on my list of things. In fact, I don't know anybody who really mixes myrrh, and of course somebody from Young Living is going to correct me here on this one. But what is going on here? This is a narcotic. Josephus tells us that gall, myrrh, mixed with the wine like this was done to dull the senses, to essentially get you high so that you weren't going to suffer as much the pain that you were about to endure. Because as we've discussed, crucifixion is not a pleasant way to die. And so actually what this is an act of mercy, saying, hey, take this drink, dull the senses, you're going to die anyway. You're already dying, right? He's hemorrhaging blood at this point. So you might as well just take this little act of mercy so that you don't have to feel as much what we're about to do to you. Strange mercies. Yet Jesus does not partake. Why? Because Jesus is going to face everything coming to him willingly. He is facing everything that is in front of him as a willing servant of the Lord. He knows what's coming. We've talked about that before. He knows every strike of that whip and what it's going to feel like. He knows what it's going to feel like to have the stones tearing into his feet as he carries the crossbeam up the hill. He knows the nails in his hand are coming. He knows what it's going to feel like to suffocate, to asphyxiate because of his own body weight. He knows all of that is coming, yet he willingly partakes. He is going to face this under his own strength. Interesting, isn't it? He is not willing to dull his senses. He is not willing to just go along with the flow. He is going to ensure that he is the one in control of himself all the way until the end, and we're going to see that today. It is a powerful image of the submission of Christ to the Father's plan for him, that he would not willingly dull himself before being crucified. And then, of course, it says over his head they placed the charge that was against him, which read, "This is Jesus, King of the Jews." Now, Matthew leaves it there, but in Luke's account and in Mark's account as well, we find that the Sanhedrin, they balk at that, right? They come after him and say, hey, Pilate, don't have it say King of the Jews, right? And in fact, we find it says King of the Jews not just in Latin, right? But it says it in Greek as well as in Hebrew and in Aramaic, so that everyone will know as they pass by, this is the King of the Jews. And the Romans mean it mockingly, right? This is your so-called king. This is what we, the Romans, will do to your so-called king. We're the ones with authority. We are the ones in power. We are the ones in control. And they go to Pilate and say, hey, You should instead say, this man said he was king of the Jews. That would be more accurate. And what does Pilate say in return? It says what it says. Get out of my palace. He has no time for it. He won't correct it. It says what it says. Live with it. Of course, the beauty of that is that it's a true statement, isn't it? This is the King of the Jews. This is the Son of David. 6 days before, they were heralding this man as the Son of David, come to Jerusalem to reestablish the throne and the line of David. That's what they were heralding just 6 days before. That's going to play in. Remember that thought. It's going to play in here very soon. All right, verse 38, moving forward. It says, then 2 robbers were crucified with him, one on the right and one on the left. And those who passed by derided him, wagging their heads and saying, you who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross. And so also the chief priests, with the scribes and the elders, they mocked him, saying, he saved others, yet he cannot save himself. He's the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God deliver him now, if he desires him. For he said, I am the Son of God. And the robbers who were crucified with him also reviled him in the same way. Okay, remember, we started with Psalm 22, and I said there was a reason for that. Do you see how Matthew is painting the same picture? Right? The crowds are around. They surround me, all around me, and they are all against me. In fact, Matthew, we're going to say this very gently, takes some literary liberty here. Okay? And there's an alleged contradiction here. One of them is that there at the end, verse 44, the robbers who crucified with him also reviled him in the same way. What's the problem with that verse? Well, we talk about the saved thief on the cross all the time, don't we? So is Matthew disagreeing and saying, well, no, actually, in fact, he wasn't saved? Well, no, time out. Matthew's trying to make a point. He's making a literary point for emphasis that the Lord is by himself. He is showing you that this is fulfillment of prophecy, that no one's coming to save him. That there isn't going to be some glorious coming down from the cross. That there isn't going to be this retaking of Jerusalem that we'll talk about in a moment. That's what he's trying to get across. Okay? So if you want to ask yourself, well, was the thief on the cross saved or not? I'm going to say, yeah, he was saved. Read the other 3 Gospels. Matthew's trying to show us something here. In the same way, John actually has Jesus crucified at a different time than the other Gospels do. It's not because John was stupid. John was there. Okay? John is trying to show you that Jesus is the Passover lamb, come to take away the sins of the world. They have different emphasis. And so because of this different emphasis, they emphasize different things out of the narrative. They pull different parts of the narrative together. The final words of Jesus are different in different Gospels. Why? Because we're pointing out different things about his mission. That bothers us as 21st century readers because as Americans, we think that everything that's written should be a neat historical record. Right? Like a court record. And people treat the Gospels like they are a court record. Right? We need to have the transcript exactly from this to this to this to this to this. But that's not how they thought. This would not have been inappropriate, in other words, as a literary convention. They wouldn't look at Matthew and say, but John has it right? No, they would understand. Matthew is emphasizing something different. He is showing us that the Christ is suffering on that cross alone, reviled and mocked by the world, yet still submitting to the Father's plan to the very end. That's what he's trying to show us here. Now, the very question actually that comes up here is about the robbers themselves. It says that there were 2 robbers that were crucified, one on either side. And as we've said, we talk about the thief on the cross. Well, I was curious about this. I looked at that Greek word just for kicks. And believe it or not, it can mean something other than robbers. Because I don't know about you. If you have a guy who's being punished for treason, right, that sounds like a capital crime to me. Even in our modern societies, treason against your nation is a capital crime most of the time. And so having that and a thief have the exact same punishment, I don't know, it just didn't sit right with me. So I looked at it just for kicks. And you know what I found? I found something very interesting. That word, robber, Josephus uses it a number of ways. He uses it for a thief, a common thief or robber. He uses it as a highwayman would be another one. So, for example, the man who is robbed on his way to Jericho in the parable of the Good Samaritan, right? Same word there, having the thieves that come and beat him. But it also stands for revolutionaries. In fact, the English word that probably better describes this is not robber or thief, but bandit, outlaw. That can mean a lot more things, can't it, folks? In fact, when I was reading this out of the CSB, the Christian Standard Bible, it flat out says outlaws or revolutionaries is in parentheses. And if we take that reading for a moment, and I'm not trying to make a case for one over the other, that's not my point here, we see something very interesting. The Romans have crucified what they consider to be 3 revolutionary zealots, religious zealots, all together. That starts to make the point, doesn't it? That starts to make a little bit more sense, doesn't it? Now, if you like your traditional reading where they are common thieves, more power to you. Keep that reading, right? But there's another image there that I do think was worth bringing up for us. You who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross. And so also the chief priests with the scribes and the elders mocked him, saying, he saved others, yet he cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe in him. Do any of you believe that last sentence? I don't believe that last sentence. How many times they said, oh, give us a sign. And he gives them a sign and say, not that sign. How many times they have challenged him and challenged his authority, and he has demonstrated his authority, and then what? They go, not good enough. Let him come down from the cross, then we'll believe in him. You know what would have happened if he came down off of that cross? They would have ran for their life. They wouldn't have bowed down in worship. We're going to talk about that here in just a minute. We just talked on Wednesday about Zechariah 13, 7 through 9. I'm going to read that passage for us in just a moment. But the reality is that if Jesus comes down off that cross, it's because he is about to fulfill their expectations of what the Messiah was going to do. Remember, they wanted an earthly kingdom established, right? They wanted the Romans out. They wanted an independent Jerusalem. They wanted an independent Israel that was free. They thought that's what it was going to mean to have the kingdom of David reestablished. Yet Jesus from the beginning has said what? My kingdom is not of this world. There will be a day when he does come, and he comes in wrath, and he comes to judge. But that's not this day. Interestingly enough, Joel in his prophecy says, woe to you. Woe to you who desire the day of the Lord. It will not be a day of blessing for all. It will not be a day where everyone is going to suddenly believe in the Lord and suddenly be rewarded for that. Woe to you for desiring a day of judgment. If he is the King of Israel, let him come down now from that cross, and we will believe in him. Now, from the 6th hour to verse 45, we're going to finish these last couple of verses together. It says, now from the 6th hour there was darkness over all the land until the 9th hour. And about the 9th hour Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That is, my God, why have you forsaken me? And some of the bystanders hearing it said, this man is calling Elijah. And one of them at once ran and took a sponge, filled it with sour wine, put it on a reed, and gave it to him to drink. But the other said, wait, let us see whether Elijah will come and save him. And Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. It's as far as we're going to go today, but I have a lot to say about this section. This is another one of those passages that as a kid you read it and you go, okay, I get it. Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. I get that. Okay. I get that sounds kind of like Elijah, but why does he think they're calling Elijah? Why do they think that he's calling Elijah down to help him at this point? Why Elijah of all people? It makes not a lot of sense to us, right? You got to be steeped in the Old Testament to understand these things. Let's Let's look real quick at that passage I referenced, Zechariah 13, 7 through 9. This is the passage we went over just this last week on our Wednesday night service. If you're looking for Zechariah, just Matthew, Malachi, Zechariah, just 2 books back. Okay. It says this. It says, "Awake, O sword, against my shepherd, against the man who stands next to me, declares the Lord of hosts. Strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. I will turn my hand against the little ones. In the whole land, declares the Lord, 2/3 shall be cut off and perish. 1/3 shall be left alive. And I will put this third into the fire, and I will refine them as one refines silver, and test them as gold is tested. They will call upon my name, and I will answer them. I will say, they are my people, and they will say, the Lord is my God." This is a passage of judgment. This is following the suffering shepherd, and it's funny because we just heard Jesus quote this exact passage, didn't we? Not that long ago. At the Last Supper, he warned them of this very same thing. He quoted this exact passage, saying that they will strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. They were warned that this was coming. They knew this was coming. What I want to point out to you is, who is it that strikes the shepherd? The Lord. The Lord is the one who strikes down the shepherd. And it's his shepherd. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to us, does it? Why is the Lord striking down his own shepherd? Well, because he has to. Why does the Lord allow Christ to take up the cross and go up Golgotha? Because he has to. This is the only way that the sins of mankind can be forgiven. This is the only way that the door can be opened. Remember, Father, if there be another way, let this cup pass from me. But nonetheless, thy will be done. There is no other way. He will strike the shepherd. And in that moment, what does it say? I will turn my hand against the little ones. Who's the one speaking again? The Lord. Remember, don't rush to be excited for a day of judgment. The day of the Lord will be a day of judgment. And here it says, 2/3 shall be cut off and will perish, and 1/3 will remain, and he will refine that 1/3 like silver and gold. So when he is on the cross then, and he cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me? And they say, is he calling Elijah? Remember, what is Elijah's role regarding the day of the Lord? He is the one that will cry out of the wilderness, right? Make straight the paths of the Lord. Elijah will be the herald for the Messiah coming in. That was John the Baptist's mission, remember? That's why they asked him. I mean, we're jumping all over scriptures today, right? But that's why they asked him, are you Elijah who is to come? And what did John say? No, I'm not Elijah, I'm John. Didn't you listen? But then laughably, what's the next line? They say, well, who are you? And he says, well, I'm the voice crying out in the wilderness. Make straight the ways of the Lord. Which is Elijah's job. And then just a handful of chapters later, Jesus is asked, who was John the Baptist? And he says, oh, he was Elijah. Jesus just says it. This is after John the Baptist is killed. And so here they say, maybe he's calling Elijah. Why are they asking that question? Well, maybe Elijah's going to come down. Maybe he's going to make a straight path for the Lord. Maybe this is the Messiah. Maybe Elijah's going to come down and he's going to be making the way straight for our judgment because we've made a grievous mistake and we've just crucified the Messiah. And if you are there on the day of judgment and you're the one that struck down the Lord's shepherd, do you want to face judgment? Friends, this is not a happy moment for them. We see Jesus here, even in this moment, is submissive. You see, they are in this moment asking themselves, have we made this grievous mistake? Have we done what we should not have done? Are we crucifying the Messiah? Is this really about to be the moment where he reveals himself, where the angel armies come down, where the Lord is going to retake his throne by force? Maybe we're still doing this, right? Maybe the revolution's still on. And then what happens? What happens immediately after that? Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. I guess not. I guess it's not going to happen the way that we thought. I guess this isn't the Messiah. There had to have been some part of their mind that was still, even in that moment, thinking that Jesus might just come down off that cross. They had seen his miracles. They had heard his teachings. They knew his authority. Maybe Elijah will come and save him. Yet Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. The language there is very specific, isn't it? Jesus surrenders his spirit. No one takes his life. He lays it down willingly. And this is where I said, if you've hung in this long, I had one major principle I want you to take away from today. And Caleb, I'm going to have you put it up on the screen for me because it's kind of wordy. How many times have we missed what God is doing in our life because he didn't do it the way that we wanted him to do it? How many times have we looked at God's plan and just completely missed the boat because we were trying to shove God into our plans and say, well, Lord, this is what I got. Did you rubber stamp it? This is how I think it should go. This is what I think is a good idea. Me and all of my grandiose wisdom, all of my years of learnedness. This is how I think we should do it. What do you think, God? And then we ignore his answer. Christ knew the plan from the beginning, and he submitted to it willingly. How many times have you and I misunderstood God's will for our life simply because we were too busy trying to fit his movement into our narrative? We must follow Christ's example and be in complete submission to his will. You may learn his will through the study of his word and through his example, through prayer, and through fellowship, friends. I'll tell you something. I have been really enjoying watching him work mightily in the last couple of weeks, despite some very dire circumstances, despite some nasty tragedies that I would not wish upon anyone. I am watching the Lord move. I'm not just talking about it in the nation. I'm not talking about it just in the state. I'm talking about right here. Those of you that were regular attenders as of August, how encouraged are you by how full our church has been the last 3 weeks? It's a huge encouragement. It's a huge blessing. God is moving. Now, how can we move with him? How can we ensure that we are in submission to the way that he wants to do things? I pray you take that home and you meditate on that this week. Let's pray. Heavenly Father,